We have spoken over the last few seminars about live free and stay free, and some of the key parts of what that means. We started on Monday with the tree, so the branches of behaviours, the tree trunk of our beliefs, and then the roots, the root causes of why we have those beliefs and those behaviours. We talked about that and how to deal with that. We talked about our connection to Christ and recognizing his voice for ourselves. I spoke more about that last night in the main arena, where we talked about that, who do you say Jesus is? That's everything that matters in the journey of freedom. And tonight I'll speak a lot more about the journey, about the process, and what it means for us to experience freedom ongoingly and not just as a one-off event in our lives. Yesterday we spoke about renewing the mind and how to deal with some of the belief systems, the tree trunk, and today I want to talk about forgiveness. It is one of the most important parts of living free and staying free, is understanding and learning what forgiveness is and how we can use it as the tool that it's meant to be. You know, I spoke a little bit about this analogy on the interview I did on Monday morning, but I'll go back there for any of you who weren't there, but also just as a reminder, and also really as a way that I have found very useful in my own mind to help me understand what forgiveness actually does, the function of it. And it's the analogy in the story of the oyster, and how the oyster has an inbuilt, by its DNA given to it by our Creator, an ability to defend against violation, against something that would come on past the hard shell of the outside and would get past the hard shell and lodge itself on the inside of the oyster, where the living part is, where the soft part is. And it can be anything, because the oyster, like us, lives in a very challenging and toxic environment. There are things in the environment that can get in on the inside of the oyster that would destroy it if it's allowed to do that. It can be a little tiny grain of sand from the beach that it's on, or it can be a parasite that finds its way in and actually starts gnawing away and eating away at the inside, or it can even be a little broken off piece of its own shell that somehow gets lodged on the inside and starts scraping away on the inside. Now, interestingly, scientists have found that only about 50% of oysters release nacre. So nacre is what an oyster releases when one of those things gets in on the inside and all the sharp edges start cutting away. It is able to release something called nacre, which we also know as the mother of pearl. It's the very substance that a pearl is made of. So it starts releasing this nacre, which coats the violation. But interestingly, only about 50% of oysters do it, even though all oysters can do it. And they don't really know why some do and some don't. But the ones that don't ever produce a pearl, and in fact they end up being an empty shell. There's nothing left on the inside, because over time what's got on the inside has eroded them to take all the living part out, and they're just left as an empty shell. They look like an oyster on the outside, but when you open them up there's nothing there. And to be honest with you, I've known people like that. People who do not, everybody can forgive, but lots of people don't know how, or don't believe in it, or no one's ever taught them it, or they say they have and they're not really doing it, and they fail to produce the very essence of what our freedom can be made up of, which is forgiveness. It's the God-given ability to coat any violation, to take the harmful edges off of it. Doesn't take it away, doesn't pretend it didn't happen. It doesn't deny that I've been hurt or there's something there that could damage me. It accepts the fact, and because there's been something there that can be damaging, it begins to release the nacre, and layer upon layer upon layer until all the edges are gone. And interestingly, the bigger the pearl, the bigger the violation. Because if it was only a tiny little thing, 1 or 2 coats will do it and you have a small pearl. But if this is a parasite, a living thing that moves around, then the nacre required to keep it from damaging is huge. And so when an oyster is opened up and there is a huge pearl in there, you know that oyster has fought for its life. You know that oyster has done the work to release nacre after nacre after nacre. And I've seen people like that too. I've seen people who've been through the worst things in life, seen the most damaging situations, been abused and hurt and mistreated over and over and over again, and yet they have been able to release forgiveness, release this God-given ability to coat the offence, not say it didn't happen, not pretend that everything's okay now. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges of forgiveness and some of the things we believe about forgiveness. But I have seen the pearl of great value, the pearl that is misshapen and uneven and gritty, which is how you can tell a real pearl from a false one, by the way. False ones are, you can buy them for, well, we say in England, we say 10 a penny. You did really cheap, mass-produced, and they're beautifully smooth and beautifully round and beautifully shiny, but they're not real, because the real pearl is misshapen. The real pearl has got grit in it. You have to put it in your teeth to see if it's got the grit. And the grit is what makes it real, and it's the same for us as people. It's that grit. That's how you can tell that someone has fought some battles. Someone has had to do the hard work of walking through some of the difficult challenges of life and release forgiveness, because there's a grit about them. There's a depth about them. There's something that is not so polished and not so cheap. There's value and depth and significance because of what they've been through. And we all have that ability to forgive. So let's talk about some of the challenges of forgiveness. What are some of the common reasons that people struggle with it? And you'll find them in Keys to Freedom, and we work through each one step by step in the curriculum, but I'll just talk a little bit around each one at the moment. So the first one is, if I forgive, I'm saying that what happened was okay. That is a real challenge, and it's a truth. It does feel like that. If I forgive, that's like saying, well, it's okay what you did. And that's a misunderstanding and a misconception of what forgiveness actually is. Because forgiveness is nothing to do with whether or not they did what they did and that it's okay. It's what they did is not okay. But what forgiveness does is put the responsibility of the judgment for that on God. So what they did to you is between them and God, not between you and them. It's not this way. What they did, they will be held responsible for by God himself. It's that way. How you respond to what they did to you is between you and God. And so very often we tie ourselves to this person and we say, I can't forgive because that's saying what they did okay. And that's not understanding that forgiveness looks full into the face of what they did. It doesn't deny it, it doesn't walk away, it doesn't say, oh, it's fine, don't worry about it. No, it's a personal courage to look at what happened and to say, despite the fact that you hurt me, despite the fact that you mistreated me, despite the fact that you abused me, despite the fact that you did all these things, I am going to be obedient to what God tells me to do, and I'm going to release you from me and pass you on to him.
Yeah, good.
That's what forgiveness does. Doesn't say I'm going to release you from me and release you from all responsibility. No. I'm releasing you from me and passing you on to him. And he is a righteous judge. To add to that, about it feels like I'm saying it's okay, it's really important to remember that forgiveness is given and it's not earned by the person, but trust is. So just because you choose to forgive somebody doesn't mean that you trust them. Doesn't mean that you are reconciled to them. They now have to be in your life, or they have to be your friend, or you have to like them. No, forgiveness doesn't tell you to do any of those things. Forgiveness doesn't say, forgive what they did and now go out for dinner with them. No, that's not forgiveness. Forgiveness is releasing them from you and passing them on to him. It is nothing to do with you and them. So you are able and permitted And it's entirely reasonable for you to forgive somebody and to not ever speak to them again. That doesn't mean you've not got any unforgiveness. That doesn't mean that you've not forgiven them. It just means you've put a boundary down and said, you are not a safe person for me. I don't trust you. And it's okay not to trust someone. Just because if you are stolen from, you would forgive a thief, but you're not going to give him the keys to your house. Right? So I forgive you for stealing from me, but I'm not giving you my keys. I'm not doing all the things I should do to protect my home from people like you. So there's a difference between the forgiveness and putting boundaries down. And lots of people get these things confused. So they say, I don't want to forgive because A, I don't want to feel like it's okay what they did, and 2, I don't want them in my life. So my anger towards them and my mistrust and my frustration means they stay a safe distance away. Which is fine, because that's true, they might stay a safe distance away, but you are still attached to them emotionally and spiritually if you don't forgive. So they still have the power. They still have the power to, every time you think of them, every time you see someone who looks like them, every time you hear a song that was the song that they played or that you shared or whatever, that then means that you are still pulled back into that memory, pulled back into the pain, pulled back into the same feelings of anger and betrayal. So actually not forgiving somebody holds you tight to them in a way that the whole point is that you don't want to be tied to them anymore. So it doesn't make sense in one way, but I have to tell you that often the things that God asks us to do in the process of freedom don't make sense. And I'll talk a bit about that tonight in the session. Second one, I can forgive, but I can't forget. That's another reason why people struggle with forgiveness, because they think that forgiveness and forgetting what happened is the same thing. Again, there's a difference. It would actually be unwise to forget. We're not able. God says that He removes our sins and He remembers them not. Now God can do that, but we can't. So we can't forget what happened. But what forgiveness does is it allows the pain of the memory to be taken away over time. It means that when you do remember the situation, you're not taken back there. You can see the situation for where you are now. You can remember it without all of the smells and the sights and the sounds and the feelings that go with it. Forgiveness cuts the tie of your connection to that situation. And so forgiveness, again, we talk about it in the Bible a lot, but even in the secular world, forgiveness is a tool that's used. Sometimes it's called letting go, or processing the trauma, or there's an element of letting go that is really important for your own mental health and well-being long term. That you do not keep attached to all the various attachments that can keep you locked in the past. And so it's not wise to think that you're going to forget, because we also need to learn from the situations we've been through. We learn lessons from the things we face, the battles we fight, the situations that have hurt us and damaged us. We learn lessons from them, and if we were to forget them, we would have to relearn again and again and again. So actually, yes, forgive, but don't think forgiving and forgetting are the same thing. So again, be okay with, I have forgiven that person, I haven't forgotten what they did, I'm learning from the situation, and I'm protecting myself from it happening again by doing these different things. So that is a well-balanced way to view forgiveness, instead of thinking, well, I'm not going to forgive because I'll never forget, so I might as well not forgive either. You're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That's again an English phrase, I don't know if it makes any sense. Does it? Yeah? So, forgive, don't forget. But allow forgiveness to take the pain away out of the memory. And the third one that people often say when we talk about forgiveness, and there's an internal narrative going on, yes, but I don't feel like it. I don't want to. Okay, then stay how you are. No one's going to make you. Don't forgive if you want to, but the consequences of not forgiving are yours and yours alone. It's not their oyster that's going to get gnawed away on the inside, it's yours. So the violation wasn't given to them, it was given to you. So you're the one with the little grain of sand, you're the one with the parasite inside, you're the one who's at risk of being eaten away on the inside out, not them. They caused it, but you not forgiving doesn't do them any harm. Only you. So yet again, they have the power, because you don't feel like it. Okay, don't feel like it, don't forgive, but you will stay the same, and we'll open you up one day and there'll be nothing but an empty shell, and it won't be their fault, it will be yours, because you didn't forgive. And I'm being very harsh right now, but that's the reality. You can blame them if you want. You did this, so now I'm like this. It's your fault, and I do not want to forgive you. Again, it goes back to, you think that forgiveness is letting them off. It's not. Forgiveness is putting them in front of Jesus. And he doesn't let anybody off. He is a righteous judge. So remember what forgiveness is. You've already got a question. Come on, that's great.
It's just, you say that you're not letting them out when you're forgiving them. And you're putting them over to Jesus. But Jesus is also a merciful God. So I've struggled with how to comprehend him. Like if they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, God, please forgive me,"
Yeah.
then they'll be let off.
Yeah. So good point. God, Jesus is a merciful God. He might let them off. He's a righteous judge. He is called a righteous judge, and he may, but it's between them. It's between them and Jesus. And you have, now it goes to, now that's a matter for your relationship with Jesus. Do you trust him? Oh, she said, if you forgive and place them before Jesus, what if Jesus lets them off? You know, Jesus is a merciful God, and he may forgive them, and he's going to let them off. And my answer is, he might. That's not for us to decide. Each of us will stand before the throne of heaven one day and be held accountable for our own actions. And you have to trust that Jesus is a righteous judge. Yes, he is a merciful God, but he is also a righteous judge. And what happens between that person and God is something you're going to have to trust to God. It's not our place to sit, and God says it, I think it's in Colossians, leave the judging to me. In fact, I think I have it. I did look it up earlier. I thought somebody might ask me that question. I did. It says, this is in the Message translation. Don't hit back, discover beauty in everyone. If you've got it in you, get along with everybody. Don't insist on getting even. That's not for you to do. I'll do the judging, says God. I will take care of it. So don't take my word for it, take his. He says, I'll do the judging. You leave it to me. Don't worry yourself with what I'm going to do with them. You release you by forgiving, and I'll deal with them. In the same way that we may offend others, and we do damage to others, and we will. There's none of us in here are without sin. None of us here have not hurt someone else. We have all hurt somebody, whether we meant to or whether we didn't mean to. We have. So at some point, it goes round the other way, and we're the ones who have caused damage to somebody. And my prayer is that they at least forgive me. And I stand before God receiving forgiveness for the things I've done that I know about and the things I've done that I don't know about. And it's a regular prayer of mine. Lord, forgive me for the damage I've done that I didn't mean to do, for the damage I've done that I did mean to do, and for the damage I don't even know about. I ask for your forgiveness. And that's how I prepare myself for standing before the throne of heaven one day. Kind of deal with it as I go along, instead of saving it all up for the day of judgment. I'll just sorry Lord, I did that wrong. So, does that help? Yeah? Oh, the scripture? Romans 12, verse 17 to 20. I don't have my glasses on. I think it's 20, and it's in the Message translation. Okay. So I don't feel like it. My answer to that is sometimes you have to do things you don't feel like. You have to just be obedient. It's like going to the doctors and saying, I have all these symptoms, and the doctor goes, oh, I've got just the right medicine for that. Has a few side effects, but it's better than the illness you have. So you take a tablet and you go, oh, I don't like that. It makes me feel this or that. So you stop taking it because you don't like the effects and you don't feel like being tired for the day. You don't feel like this. But the fact is, the disease you have is worse than the side effects of the medicine. But because you don't feel like taking the medicine, you go back a month later and say nothing's changed, and the doctor will say, well, did you take the medicine? Well, no, because I didn't like the side effects. Well, that's why you're still sick. So we have to have the same view with forgiveness. Yes, there's some parts of forgiveness that do not taste nice. Doesn't feel good. It doesn't. There's all these emotions that come up. It's difficult to do when we have the concept of the things I've just highlighted. But the fact is, God said, for our own health, for our own well-being, for our freedom, for our wholeness, forgiveness is key. So you just need to do it. In the words of Nike, just do it. And it's not a feeling anyway. It's an action. It doesn't come out of how you feel. It comes out of a decision of your will. It's a decision in the very center of your being. People often say that the will is part of our soul. It's, mind, will, and emotion. Actually, I think it's more accurate to say that our will sits in the very center. If you imagine a dartboard with rings around it, right in the very center, bullseye is will. It is our very seat of authority as human beings. It's where we have our autonomy and our ability to make choice. It's what God gave us as humanity, and we constantly have to exercise our will and submit it under His will. Not my will, but your will be done. And out of our will, we make choices. It's out of our will that we choose to forgive. It doesn't come from the soul, it doesn't come from the emotion, it doesn't come from the mind, it doesn't come even from the spirit. It comes from the will. I choose. I will forgive. And it's a choice we make many times as we go through our journey. The other common, and they're all related really. These common beliefs about forgiveness are all related to each other. This one is, I can't forgive until they say sorry. How can I forgive without them apologizing? Well, again, guess who's got the power? Who has the power where you say, until you apologize, I won't forgive? They have the power yet again. You're giving away your power for freedom and wholeness and restoration and transformation to the person who hurt you. That doesn't make any sense. Take the power back. Forgive, because it releases you from them. By saying, I won't forgive until you apologize, you are bowing your knee to whether they even know they did something wrong. You're bowing the knee to a dysfunctional mindset who says, how many people do you know that will never apologize even when they know they're wrong? So you're going to submit to that? No. Submit to Jesus who says, forgive. Leave them to me. Don't wait for an apology. Don't wait for them to say sorry. Don't wait for them to take responsibility. Because to be honest with you, you're going to be waiting a long time, and yet again you are placing yourself under the authority of another person when really this is between you and God. You are still doing horizontal. So forgiveness, remember, forgiveness is not between them and you. It releases, it breaks the tie between them and you. It puts you between you and God. That's forgiveness. And you need this to even be able to forgive.
So the forgiveness, is that inside of you, or do you really have to say it to the person?
The question is the forgiveness on the inside of you, or do you really have to say it? Well, if you know anything about me, you need to say it. There's something powerful about hearing your own voice. And here's the thing, and we've taught our residents this, and we teach it in Peace to Freedom, that it's not just, oh, I forgive them. For what and why? Be specific. I forgive so-and-so for doing this or not doing this because it made me feel like that. So there's a responsibility of the effect. It caused me to, so you actually draw it all the way through to why. And sometimes it's good to say, I choose to forgive, I will forgive, I am forgiving, I release forgiveness. So you activate with your words the release of Naka. It's a decision of your will. And you might not feel different the first time or the second time or the third time, but you will. One day you'll go, when I think about it, it doesn't hurt so much anymore. I can remember what happened, but I don't feel like crying when I think about it. I don't feel shaky when I think of that person. There's a change in the relationship. The power of the effect it used to have on you is lessened every time you forgive. And I think it's important to say that forgiveness is a lifelong tool. It is not a one-off thing that you do when you're in your therapy sessions and now we're going through Keys to Freedom and going, okay, so I've done the forgiveness, what's next? It's literally like a pair of scissors. You don't stop using a pair of scissors. You don't learn how to use a pair of scissors when you're 4 years old and then stop when you're 10 because now you know how to use it. You never need to use scissors again. No, you use scissors your whole life. Every time you need to cut something, you use scissors. I cut my chicken with scissors. Literally, it's so much easier. It's a life hack for you right there. I literally get the chicken, cut it with scissors. So scissors are something you use every day, and some of us keep forgiveness in a special place in the cupboard of our lives and go, I'll get it when I need it. Can I tell you, if you don't need it on a daily basis, then you're a much more forgiving person than me. I need forgiveness every day. I have the scissors with me, just in case. Because every time you feel an ouch, that's how I measure it. When I feel an ouch, when I feel the way they said that, the word they used, when it gets a little rise inside you of, like when they don't invite you to the prayer meeting that was your idea, or something like that. I just make that up, that didn't actually happen. But I'm just picking things, there's lots of times in life where we go, ouch, don't know why that hurt, but it did, and I've stopped asking myself, why did that hurt? I just go, that hurt. So usually I go to the bathroom, because it's a nice, quick, private place, lock the door. Right, Lord, just release forgiveness to that person for saying what they just said. I know whatever is going on for them. I just release them. I refuse it to do any damage in me. I refuse it to feed a lie that I'm currently dealing with on my renewing the mind. So you just keep the things separate. Like, that person just said that, and I feel that already in my life. That's a lie that I'm currently speaking out, and I've written the scriptures out for, and then this person's just said something that makes the lie stronger. So I forgive the person. They know not what they do. Just forgive them right now in Jesus' name. And I declare that I am not and you go into your... Honestly, this is a daily activity. And so many of us don't utilize the tools that God has actually given us for our benefit. This isn't for their benefit, whoever they is in your life. This is all for you and your benefit. And the last thing I'll say before we have some more questions is that there's usually 3 people you need to forgive. Yourself, potentially the hardest one, actually. Lots and lots of people, and I've seen this over 20 years of pastoral leadership now, lots of people manage to forgive the most awful things and release their abusers and release the people who've done the most possible damage really successfully and receive a good amount of healing and freedom in it, but then get totally stuck on forgiving themselves. I shouldn't have been there. I should have reacted differently. I wish I'd have. And that regret and the if-onlys that we hold over ourselves are like the little piece of the shell that breaks off on the oyster from its own shell and gets stuck inside. Just so you know, the oyster doesn't have a different kind of nacre for a shell that breaks off from its own shell. It's the same thing. So forgiveness is forgiveness. It doesn't matter what the offence is or who you have unforgiveness towards. Whether it's others, which is the other group of people, you need to forgive others, forgive yourself, and if you feel like God has somehow let you down, then you need to forgive God. See, some people, when we first started talking about forgiving God, the questions came from, the theology of, well, God is perfect. God does no wrong, so why would we need to forgive a God who is perfect? Well, the answer to that is, A, remember what I said, forgiveness isn't about whether or not they say sorry or whether they've even done something wrong. It's perception is reality. If you perceive, if you believe that God has let you down, that is your reality. And the pain that you feel of being disappointed and let down, whatever the theology might be of who God is and that he never makes a mistake, we can keep telling ourselves that, but it doesn't take the pain away. Right? Anybody ever been disappointed in an unanswered prayer or a situation that turns out differently than you thought it should? Or a God that didn't intervene and now you're dealing with the difficulties of that? So instead of saying, well, God is perfect, it must be me, I'm wrong, so I'm going to be angry with myself, or I'm going to be quietly angry with God, just not tell anybody, because he's not very Christian, or God is perfect, so I can't be angry at him. No, he's perfect, without fault, but that doesn't mean you don't feel a pain when there's decisions or things that happen that you perceive to have hurt you. So forgive. Forgive. Say, Lord, I don't understand. I don't understand what happened, why it happened. And I just release forgiveness because I don't want the damage of what I thought I should have had to stop me in my intimacy with you. Because unforgiveness, resentment, offense between you and God will put a block there as quick as anything. And then you will be separated more and more and more, and you'll wonder 5 years from now whether you even believe in God. And it'll start with, where was God when? And not talking to him about that. Not releasing forgiveness and not saying, Lord, I forgive you. I know you don't do wrong, but it feels wrong to me, so I'm going to forgive you. There's nothing wrong with doing that. In fact, it's very good, very healthy. Right, so you forgive others, you forgive yourself, and if you need to, you forgive God. Any questions in the 10 minutes that we have? At the back first. Can you tell I've been in church since I was born? So life, everyday life, how do you balance that up with then sitting down and talking to the person? And there's the Matthew scripture of, being offended and sitting down with someone. To me, that really depends on the value you place on that relationship. So if this is someone you have to have in your life, it's a family member, or you're married to the person and you want to stay married to the person, if this is a valuable relationship to you, then yes, talk about it. Make it part of your communication. You'll probably find out that you've done things to hurt and offend them too. You'll probably find out that most of it's a misunderstanding. There's a range, there's a scale of offences, and we have to be careful to make generalizations. So saying don't ever speak to the person and cut them off, obviously I don't mean that when you're married to them and you want to stay married, and it's not abusive. It's just people being people, and it's dysfunctional, but it's not illegal or immoral or unethical. There's a different scale where, is that person safe for you? Well, yes, they're just human and they said things and did things that have affected me and hurt me. Well, if you want to keep that relationship, talk about it. Tell them how you feel. And so you apply all the same things to the relationship that you would to maintain any good and healthy relationship. So yes, in that sense, and thank you for the clarification, that really helps. Just to say, obviously, please don't go and cut people out of your life. Because, I heard this preacher once say that we should cut people out once we've forgiven them. No. Use wisdom, use the intelligence God has given you, and apply the boundaries in your relationships with people. I mean, there's a whole, we could do hours about relationships because relationships are very complicated. But yeah, as a general rule, how much do you value that relationship, and do you want to keep it? If so, talk about it and decide whether what you need to talk about is an ongoing issue or if it's a one-off. I forgive my husband all the time for things that he had no idea that he did. But usually it's just little things that I probably shouldn't even be bothered about, so I kind of just realise it's probably mostly me. Go ahead.
You talked a little bit about forgiving yourself as well, and like that can be really difficult. So what would be your biggest tip on that specifically?
The biggest tip on forgiving yourself, because it's very difficult, I'll just do it. Honestly, sometimes we can get so in our heads. What's the formula? What's the magic wand? What's the thing? What are the steps I need to follow? What is the words I need to pray in the prayer? And you know, you can, even in Keys to Freedom, you can go, oh, if I don't pray the prayer that's in that book, then that won't work. Can I just say don't get so caught up in the formula. It is action, it is intention, it is an act of your will, and it will look differently for you than it does for another person. It is about doing it. I forgive you. You can use the same prayer. I forgive you. I forgive me for not acting or not saying or not doing or whatever it is that you hold yourself responsible for, and you release yourself to God. Say, Lord, I forgive myself. I release myself to you. Do what you need to do in me to help strengthen me, to help me learn from this, to help me not behave in the same way again, and be kind to yourself. Because the Lord said, it says in the Word, you know, the three most important things are that we love God and love others as ourselves. So you can't even begin to love others if you don't have a good relationship with yourself. So actually, forgiving yourself is one of the important things, not just to be well in yourself, but to be able to love others well and forgive others well. There is a correlation, there's a relationship there. So, sorry it's not more complicated than just do it. It's my best advice, just do it. Yeah?
You said a couple of times that forgiving someone is releasing them to God from yourself. What if you don't feel like you've been hurt by other people? You don't feel like you've been hurt by God?
Yeah. So releasing yourself, talking about forgiveness is releasing people to God and His judgment. But if you not feel like you've not really been hurt by other people, but just by God, well, then you do the same thing. It goes back to forgiving God. In fact, there's a whole chapter, I think it's 2 days worth or 1 day, in the book on the question. It says forgiving God ? Because it's something that we need to explore on what that looks like for you. And a lot of it depends on what that person's relationship is with God. So sometimes it's really about addressing even some of the core beliefs the person has about who they think God is, who He is to them. Sometimes there's transference of human relationships onto God, and we treat Him like He's human. So really there's a lot more to explore within that, but the principle is the same. If you feel you've been hurt by God, then you activate the nature of forgiveness to cope that and protect the relationship and connection you have with Him by doing that. But read more in the book about that, gives a bit more practical steps on and some scriptures, and it'll probably explain it more than I have time to do right now. I think one more question and then we'll get in the not so fresh air. Yeah.
How do you do it in your work with
How do we do forgiveness?
Yeah, how do you do it with
No, we don't just work with the young women in the home. This is taught through Keys to Freedom, and we have, you can get trained as a facilitator and run Keys to Freedom groups in your church. So we have about 400 churches in the UK who use Keys to Freedom as their main discipleship program. So we teach them how to do these things in the group. Now, the difference between Keys to Freedom and other courses is that it's not, we teach you from the front, you break into groups and talk about it, and then go home and come back next week and we'll do the same again. It's the other way around. You do all the work at home by yourself. You've got your pen, your Bible and the Holy Spirit. You're filling in the questions. You're have a devotional time, you're talking to Holy Spirit, and then you go to the group, and the group will be there for encouragement, for prayer support, for questions. The facilitator is there to allow people to question, maybe day 3 when they really struggled. Usually forgiveness is a really good one in the group to do together, because lots of people have questions about it and they struggle with it. So having the group support is a really good way to support each other in the journey of forgiveness. In terms of with the residents, they have a one-to-one counsellor, and for some of the really, really tough things, forgiveness isn't just something. See, none of these things are things you do like separate from the other things. So this isn't a step by step by step. It's almost like a circle. So you constantly use renewing the mind. One of the weeks in there talks about healing life hurts, and someone had a question the other day about the sozo sort of prayer ministry, the receiving healing on the inside of us. That is a really important part of working through trauma and releasing forgiveness, but also receiving. You know what? In fact, I'll add this. One of the important things that I've experienced in releasing forgiveness is as you release, it's like almost like you're doing that. You release forgiveness, and you're there. All the anger and the bitterness and the offense and you hold it open and you release it in something called forgiveness. And I've often waited and say, Lord, what would you have? What would you give me instead? Is there anything you want to give me instead of that? And so often he gives me something. So often there's we call it a divine exchange. You give him the emotions that are attached to it. You give him, you claim that. When you pray, you go, forgiveness is going to do what it's supposed to do. It's going to release me from them. It's going to attach me to you. And Lord, right now, I just release them to you. Pray a blessing on them. You'll have to do that through gritted teeth. Lord, what do you have for me? And so it's that divine exchange that takes place. But like I said, it's not just something on its own. Forgiveness is not on its own. It's attached to all the other things we've been talking about our relationship with him, being able to recognize his voice, renewing our minds, so dealing with the belief systems, healing life hurts. So it's all part of the same thing. So it runs all the way through all of those aspects and all of those keys. I think we are done again.